Infirmaries can be interesting and intimidating institutions, but one thing is for certain: the industry is indispensable. We go there to get nursed back to health if we get ill or injured, or go under the knife if need be. In an emergency, we can even be rushed there in an ambulance. While many come out with a clean bill of health, some patients never leave these paramedical places.
Paging Dr. Alonso. Please report to ER ASAP.
We'll make sense of hospitals on this week's episode of FYI. Welcome to For Your Info.
En inglés.
You got it. Hello, amigos. Welcome to another exciting edition of FYI. And today we are going to the hospital. Let's start out by making sure you pronounce the word correctly. Hospital. Say it with me. Hospital. Not hospital. Ha. Ha, ha, ha. Hospital. Well, it's no laughing matter. Some of this vocabulary could save your life. I hope you never have to use a lot of these terms, but today we're going to discover all kinds of things that have to do with healthcare and the medical industry. I'd like to send a special shout out to Isa, one of my students who also works in the healthcare industry. We'll dedicate this episode to you, Isa. And if you want to join Isa and be a part of my curious community, it's real simple. All you have to do is go over to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso, and you can join our curious community. We have a great group of people who meet once a week, and we have a review class. But if you're in my interstellar level, you have a weekly review class and a monthly private class with me, as well as PDF documents and bonus episodes. And you'll also get early access to all my posts. Let's put it this way. If you listen to the episode of FYI and you're hungry for more, then you've got to go over to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso. Plus, the PDFs are extremely useful because I imagine you don't know all the vocabulary I'm going to cover in each episode, but you can follow along, and then you can see how much of it you got with our worksheets. And as you know, every week we look at a different topic, and I'm always eager to receive new topic ideas from you guys. So if you have any suggestions, let me know. We're in our 5th season now, and it's not like I'm running out of ideas, but I'm always open to hearing new ideas. As I always say, some of the greatest episodes have been suggestions from my students. And speaking of my students, I'd like to send you all a shout out, especially my super duper students, Lina, Javier, Paco, Roberto, Jose Maria, Mila, and Alex. And don't forget about my interstellar students, Carmen, Paco, David, Edgar, and as I mentioned before, Isa. If you guys want extra content every week, and more importantly, if you want to be a part of a curious community of cool people, then you should consider joining us. And if you can't afford it, or it's not your cup of tea, that's okay as well. You can always listen to the free episode that comes out every week. And if you're very patient, I release the bonus episodes. But usually, for example, right now we're in season 5. I'm releasing bonus episodes from season 3 and season 4. So you have to be extremely patient. And speaking of patient, hey, that's a great segue. A patient should be patient. It's the same word. And when you make it plural, my patients have a lot of patience, it sounds like the noun. I love when we can play with words and have fun with them. And you can imagine there are tons of jokes that have to do with patients and their patients. But let's kick off with our intro as we always do, because I like to sprinkle a lot of cool vocabulary, a lot of palabrones, as you call them in Spanish. I guess you could call them in English million-dollar words. Those words that when you use them, people are pretty impressed. I started out by saying infirmaries. Now, it's not very common to call it an infirmary. That sounds more antiquated, or it sounds like military style. As I said, we call them hospitals, but just make sure you're pronouncing it correctly. I said they can be interesting and intimidating institutions. And I don't know about you guys, but I often get intimidated when I'm at a hospital. And there's a big difference between being in the hospital and at the hospital. If you're in the hospital, you're a patient. If you're at the hospital, maybe you're visiting somebody or you work there. And we're going to talk about all the professionals who work at these amazing places and keep them going 24/7, 365. Then I said, one thing is for certain. The industry is indispensable, imprescindible. I think you also say indispensable. Well, then that's easy. Indispensable. I said we go there to get nursed back to health. And to get nursed back to health means somebody takes care of you until you're better. It makes sense. The word nurse is enfermera, so if you nurse somebody back to health, you're taking care of them until they're healthy again. Then I mentioned getting ill or getting injured. Remember, you can say to get ill or to get sick. And to get injured is lesionarse. Just don't mix it up with an injury, which is the noun. Or you can go under the knife if need be. And I've only gone under the knife twice. One time to put some screws in, and another time to take the screws out. I hope I don't go under the knife again. And this is a very scary, intimidating way of saying to be operated on. And notice I said to be operated on. He was operated on last week. The doctor operates on his patients. So don't learn the word operate without learning the preposition on, which also goes with it. Have you ever been operated on? Have you ever gone under the knife? Answer using a full sentence and aloud, and this way you're practicing these structures. And anytime you hear some vocabulary that you haven't heard or something that stands out to you, pause the podcast and repeat it aloud. You can always go back 15 or 30 seconds and listen to it again. Again, if you have the PDF documents, you don't have to do that. It's all right in front of your face. Then I said, in an emergency, we can even be rushed there in an ambulance. So look at that, an emergency, an ambulance. If you notice, I put them together. There's no pause. It's not an emergency, it's an emergency. It's not an ambulance, it's an ambulance. And it's not ambulance, it's ambulance. That U is pronounced like you, Y-O-U. And that's the verb we use. We say he was rushed to the emergency room or to the ER. We're going to look at a lot of abbreviations in the bonus episode today. Plus, we're going to look at some dark, twisted hospitals too. And of course, as always, some fun facts. And I wrapped up the intro saying, while many come out with a clean bill of health, and if you have a clean bill of health, this is an idiomatic expression that means you're healthy. You're in tip-top shape. But some patients never leave these paramedical places. And obviously, some people don't survive. Maybe the surgery went wrong, it was a botched surgery, or maybe they were just terminally ill when they got there. And then you heard the typical PA, the public address system that you hear in the hospitals. You heard the chime, doom, 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 doom. And then I literally held my nose and said, paging Dr. Alonso. And to page is to try and contact somebody. I remember we used to have pagers, and that was something where you would send somebody your phone number saying, call me. So that's what they say. They page doctors. And no, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an MD, a medical doctor. Ooh, there's another acronym for you. And I used a couple more here. I said, please report to ER, emergency room, ASAP. Remember, in English, we don't say ASAP. We say ASAP or ASAP. So are you ready to take a look at hospitals? Well, let's define a hospital. What exactly is a hospital? I'll read it word for word. A hospital is an institution that provides medical care and treatment to individuals who are suffering from, there's a really good one, to suffer from, padecer de, who are suffering from illnesses, diseases, or injuries. Hospitals are typically staffed by medical professionals, including doctors, nurses, and other healthcare providers. The main objective of a hospital is to provide medical care to patients, including diagnostic services, treatment, and rehabilitation. So that's pretty straightforward. There's no mystery to it. But there's no doubt we've always had a fascination with hospitals, or at least medicine or healthcare. I know when I was a kid, I was fascinated by ambulances, but it was weird because I also feared them. So it was kind of a respect that I had for ambulances. I couldn't stop staring at them, but I didn't want to go too close either. But we just have to turn on our TVs. There have always been medical shows. Think of MASH. This is a classic show about a military hospital, one of these mobile hospitals. And that show was a huge hit. Then you've got House, Doogie Howser, ER with George Clooney. And don't forget about Scrubs, which we can learn some good vocabulary there. A doctor has to scrub their hands before they go into surgery. They also have to wear their scrubs. It's a good way to remember that it means the medical clothing, those green clothes they wear. And another way to say to wash, to rub. So just remember this sentence. The surgeon put on his scrubs and then he scrubbed his hands. Oh, and I was talking about TV shows. There are tons of movies as well that have to do with medicine, doctors, and the healthcare system. So there's no doubt that we've always had a fascination with this industry. Well, if you think about it, what are they doing in hospitals? Especially if they cure you. It feels like they're doing miracles, right? So there's a certain magical element. Well, it's science, but if we give it a little romantic twist, it could be magic. I mean, think of those witch doctors. That was a mix between magic and medicines and herbs. So when did hospitals start? Good question. The earliest documented institutions that aimed to provide cures were ancient Egyptian temples. In ancient history, hospitals have been found in Greece, Rome, and the Indian subcontinent. Oh, and Persia as well. And in ancient cultures, religion and medicine were linked. So there's that magic thing I was talking about. And think about it. Your word for priest is cura, el que cura. So you guys know all about that in Spain. We give these doctors almost like a godlike quality. We deify them. And in the end, they're just people like us. People who studied a lot. The first time they found these military hospitals was in ancient Rome. But anytime you want to find where things started, the cradle, you've got to go to Greece or Egypt. And the Romans always had something to do with everything too. Now, the Greek temples were dedicated to sick people, but they didn't look anything like modern hospitals today. And the Romans didn't have hospitals like we have today either. Public hospitals, if you will. Those didn't exist until the Christian period. This wasn't until the end of the 4th century there was something called the Second Medical Revolution. And this coincided with the founding of the first Christian hospital in the Eastern Byzantine Empire. And within a few decades, hospitals just like this one started becoming ubiquitous, at least in Byzantine society. And then, like everything, it evolved, it started to grow and develop and find itself. And it continued to grow from the 5th century to the 15th century. They are old as dirt. And then European exploration, that's right, you guys, Europeans, you brought hospitals to the colonies in North America, Africa, and Asia. So Europeans were important in spreading this idea of hospitals, of places where you could cure people. And St. Bartholomew's Hospital, which is in West Smithfield, London, was founded in 1123. It's widely considered the oldest functioning hospital today, and it was originally a charity organization, but it continues to provide free care to Londoners as it has for the last 900 years. And then there's a place in Sri Lanka called Mihintal Hospital, and this was established in the 9th century AD. And this hospital served monks and the local community. So there are a lot of firsts in this world, and I don't want to bore you with the history, but what I'm getting at here is the idea of curing people and nursing them back to health has been an issue since the beginning. And hospitals used to be small, little institutions, usually started by a church or a charitable organization. But now there's been a lot of consolidation in the industry, and you're seeing a lot of big hospitals. You're seeing chains of hospitals. And as you guys know, in the United States, hospitals, healthcare, it's big business today. They're saying that people who are sitting on the board of directors, people with no medical experience are making medical decisions. The only thing they're thinking about is cutting corners. And to cut corners means to save money wherever you can. In an article I read, they said that a lot of times upper management has zero experience, and they're the ones making these huge decisions. So the hospital and healthcare industry has become a huge business, and it's even being criticized for losing its way. Money is important, I get it. We call it the bottom line in any business. But also, when you're dealing with people, people are more important than money. You can't put a price on somebody's health. Well, in the United States we do, but that's another story. I feel very lucky to live in Spain and to have free healthcare. But in some countries, it isn't an unalienable right. As we say in the United States, you can't afford to get sick these days. And that has a double meaning. No te puedes permitir el lujo y no puedes costearlo. And just to give you an idea, the median pay, the average pay of a healthcare CEO in 2018, this was now 6 years ago, was $7.7 million. And notice, I didn't say feo, I said CEO. We say all three letters. So you're seeing a lot of overpaid fat cats. You're seeing overworked staff who are at the same time underpaid, and the hospitals are understaffed because they don't want to hire the amount of people they need. And I don't want to say anything here against doctors or nurses' aides, but I feel like nurses are the backbone of any hospital. Nurses, or as we call them, RNs. RN stands for registered nurse. Hey, I said we're going to take a look at some of these acronyms in the bonus part, but we've already looked at 3 or 4 of them in this part. Well, nurses are considered one of the most trustworthy and ethical professions in the United States. In the year 2020, nurses were voted number 1 as the most trustworthy and ethical profession. And they've won that for 18 years. 18 years in a row, the nursing industry has won the most trustworthy and ethical profession. That means they beat out doctors, policemen, firemen, teachers, even clergy. Clergy are people who work in the church. And not only are they trustworthy, but they're in shape. What? What does that have to do with anything? Well, nurses can walk an average of 8 kilometers during a 12-hour shift. They don't stop, and they do it all with a smile on their face. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a really high demand for nurses in the United States. Let me just give you an idea of some of the salaries. As of 2020, California is the best paying state for nurses to work in. They have an hourly wage of $54.44. That translates into $113,240. So if you're a nurse in California, you're making six figures. Six figures means anything over 100,000. But that's the highest paying state. What about South Dakota? That's the lowest paying state. Well, the nurses in South Dakota make $28.63. That turns out to be $59,540 annually. So if you're considering a career change, you might want to be a nurse in California. But being a nurse is not easy. You've got to pass exams. You've got to learn so much about medicine, about people, about everything. And it's hard work, as we just said. I mean, seeing sick people every day has to take its toll on you. And do you know that expression? To take its toll. You say pasar factura. You might know it from a song. This love has taken its toll on me. She said goodbye too many times before. There's my musical moment. You know I've got to have one in every show. Also, we couldn't talk about nurses without talking about Florence Nightingale. She is a pioneer, a British nurse who was considered to be the mother of modern nursing. She had influence on how nurses were educated and viewed by society. And she helped shape the healthcare industry during the Crimean War. She introduced concepts such as hand hygiene, that's a concept that's still used today, fresh air for patients, and many other sanitation practices which we still use today. So not only can you feel her legacy nowadays, but she also saved many, many soldiers' lives during the Crimean War. She lived from 1820 to 1910, and she was born in Italy, although she was raised in England. So I said a British nurse, but I guess I should have said British Italian nurse, Britalian. And she established the first scientifically based nursing school. This was in 1860. It was appropriately named the Nightingale School of Nursing, and it's located in London. Speaking of institutions where learning is going on, there are many teaching hospitals. And I remember I always used to get confused as a kid. I would say, what do you mean university? I thought it was a hospital. And I looked into it. What's the difference between a teaching hospital and a quote-unquote normal hospital? Well, teaching hospitals can actually provide better care than general hospitals. Hey, wait, that was the name of a very famous soap opera too, General Hospital. Well, there was a report that came out in 2014 by the Journal of the Association of American Medical Colleges. Say that 5 times fast. And they found that major teaching hospitals provided care for minorities and patients with more serious injuries than general hospitals. And in a more recent report, they found that mortality rates are lower at teaching hospitals. Plus, they're up to date on all the most recent research. Of course, they've got to teach their students. They've got to be on the cutting edge. So I didn't know that. I would think the opposite. I would say a general hospital is safer or more effective than a teaching hospital, but it's quite the contrary. I guess it's also the luck of the draw. It depends on where you go, who takes care of you, and what your ailment is. Your ailment is another way of saying your sickness, your problem. Here's a fun fact for you. Why are hospital rooms so, plain? I mean, there's nothing going on there. It's kind of like 4 walls. It's very sterile. They could be a little more inviting, sure, but then they're harder to clean. So when they design hotel rooms, they design them with absolute simplicity so cleaning is easier. Because remember, everything has to be cleaned and disinfected in a hospital daily. And hospitals don't close. And did you ever notice how it's always a little colder in a hospital? I always feel like they have the AC on full blast. On full blast means turned all the way up. Well, there's a reason for it. Think about the air. Bacteria spreads more in warm air. It can't survive in cold temperatures. We'll learn many more fun facts in the bonus part, along with some cool idiomatic expressions. Let's take a look at some of the departments before we get going. You've got the waiting room, which I think that's basically the same in Spanish, la sala de espera. The waiting room. Then you've got your different departments. So you've got your OB-GYN. What? OB-GYN? Yeah, obstetrician, gynecology. You've got cardiology, which my Uncle Nick was a pioneer in angioplasty. He's a very famous cardiologist who developed, along with his partners, a cutting-edge technology called angioplasty. So cardiology has always been close to my heart. Okay, I'll stop. You've got internal medicine, urology, pathology, o sea, es ology al final. El itis es itis, so conjunctivitis, conjunctivitis, bronchitis, bronchitis. The good thing is there's always some Latin in there. Just be careful with the pronunciation. But I'm sure you'll recognize these just by me saying them. So urology, pathology, neurology, orthopedics, rheumatology, psychiatry. Oh, and I wanted to talk about the difference between outpatient and inpatient. If you're outpatient, it means you don't spend the night at the hospital. It means you come in, they take some tests, maybe they draw some blood and send you on your way. It means you don't stay in the hospital. If you're inpatient, it means you are staying overnight. It makes sense. Outpatient, inpatient. You've got your anesthesiology. I can't even say that word. It's where they're anesthesia experts. And I hear they make a killing. He oído que se forran. Then you've got your nurses' aides, your doctors, your surgeons, your delivery people, your janitorial staff. There are so many people working together to keep hospitals running 24/7, 365. And not just running smoothly in an uncertain environment. Oh, and don't forget about the operating theater. What? Yeah, they call it the operating theater. You can also say the operating room. I think it's a little less dramatic. And while mistakes do happen, because to err is human, healthcare professionals are working tirelessly to get you back on your feet, to nurse you back to health. And sometimes it can be a thankless job. Nurse, can you fluff my pillow? I doubt nurses are there to fluff your pillow, by the way. But as a nurse said at Emory in Atlanta, Emory Healthcare used to be called Emory University. I know it very well because that's where my uncle worked. He's retired now. And Rebecca, a nurse at Emory Healthcare in Atlanta, Georgia, said, hospitals are not perfect. We can't fix everything. We can't take all of your problems and make them go away. We're just human beings, trying our best to help. But the reality is, we can only do so much. We're going to wrap up this first episode. I sure hope you'll join us in the bonus episode of today's FYI.